Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much also for inviting me and having me at this meeting. It's funny because I'm going to be in Helsinki in Rio in June, where the performance philosophy is going to have a conference. I think quite where you are, kind of. So I'm not so sure if I will be directly also focusing on the discussion you've just had, which was a lot, I think, and interestingly focusing on epistemological questions and even ontological questions of what artistic research is or what art is even. When looking at the topic of today's meeting, and the question whether or not artistic research should have an impact on the arts or on society, and how do we deal with guidelines, for instance, I consider this to be more a kind of ethical or political question that needs to be discussed or addressed within the field of artistic research. And so maybe I'd like to start with a little example, because exactly now at the University of Leiden, within the Academy of Creative and Performative Arts, where this PhD Arts Program is situated, we do have the discussion about a public statement of the societal relevance of the PhD Arts Program or the artistic research in general. And interestingly enough, that causes a lot of discussion, like the one you just had as such, discussions on what is artistic research. And I think it kind of shows that we still are in a historical situation where we have the strong intention that we have to legitimize ourselves as being artistic researchers. And a simple question about the societal relevance of artistic research struggles us as such, because we think we have to, as I said, legitimize and to deal with expectations and prescriptions, and also even we think we have to defend something which might be called the autonomy of the arts or the autonomy of research. So we think societal relevance, yes, but how can artistic research be utilized for anything, even societal relevance? And I do think that is a quite showing or telling or interesting situation, because we could actually also look the other way around at the situation, stating that, yes, of course, we do want to have societal relevance. We do want to have relevance in the field of sciences and humanities in general. Why? And we do have, and we are proud of it, because the simple fact of artistic research as a new factor in the world of sciences and humanities, of research, that is pluralizing the field of knowledge. It's diversifying modes, methods, practices of generating knowledges. And by that fact, simply already artistic research has an impact on sciences, on research, on humanities, and hence also in terms of the pluralizing of knowledges on society as well. So to my understanding, the question whether artistic research should or has an impact on the arts, on research, on society, in the field of sciences, I would always say, yes, we do, and we should be emphasizing that, really, not taking it as a problem, something that keeps us from being autonomous. However, there's good reasons why we think we have to defend something or develop a point of view or a standpoint That's not self-telling. Now, a little bit, I'm coming to my background, which is not in the Netherlands, where I'm now situated at a well-developed artistic research program, but from Germany. And I think it's interesting that Germany is or can be considered a little bit like a developing country in terms of artistic research, compared to other European countries, at least. There are very few institutions that host or promote or institutionalize artistic research. There's few places where artists can do research or make PhDs. There are few positions in the universities, like artistic research professor. It's almost not existing. And of course, also very few possibilities for funding. Artistic research is not something that's going to happen in an empty space or a vacuum, but it needs resources, it needs funding. And the situation in Germany is very difficult. So interestingly, I do find myself as a practicer, but also a theoretician on artistic research, not defending some kind of autonomy of the arts or artistic research against something like a demand of impact or an expectation of an impact. I do find myself defining artistic research, developing PhD regulations, institutionalizing artistic research, so to speak, materializing this kind of ephemeral field of the research in the art, because I strongly think that even though it's somehow contradictory to the idea of research or art, it needs to be institutionalized, funded, materialized, otherwise it's not really there. And the reason why I do think we have to look and defend and stress the impact of artistic research is, and also give it some circumstances, some rules, some institutionalized grounds, because it seems like at the first glance, at least, that we have, you all know, kind of lack of tradition in artistic research. And the interesting thing is, once you have a tradition, you don't need to legitimize yourself any longer. Thomas Kuhn said that the so-called normal sciences, they're not looking, they're not explaining themselves. They're not looking at their methods. They don't have to legitimize themselves. They're just there. And they stand with the power of tradition. And because artistic research does not have such a tradition or history of its own, it always needs to explain its methods, its strategies, its mere existence, basically. Now, that's interesting also, because if you look in history, the history of the academies, for instance, it is the kind of surprising situation that the mere existence of art academies has to do with the fact that in the 15th century, for instance, Leonardo da Vinci claimed art to be a science. Renaissance artists understood themselves as well artists and scientists, researchers. And they were asking or claiming or demanding art schools, art universities, as the places where art should be positioned. These very new and young forms of art academies in the 15th century that occurred in Italy, and I'm sure I'm not going to pronouncing it right, the Accademia del Disegno, this Academy of Drawing, so to put, were put in place because artists understood themselves as researchers. So, in fact, if one looks in history, one could say we do have a tradition. We do have a tradition in artistic research. It just didn't have the name, though. It just didn't have, and that's then the problem. It doesn't have a history that kind of developed, because these academies of drawing, or these young art academies, developed via history into institutions that did not understand art as research. But yeah, I don't want to go into this history now, but not as research, but more in terms of like, yeah, they had their relevance, of course, in the feudal system and so forth. So we do have a long tradition or long history in considering art as research and having an impact on society or on knowledge production, to put it that way. But it kind of was forgotten. I just want to briefly address another interesting, more younger historical aspect, because the self-understanding of the arts as being relevant for knowledge production just came back in 70s, 90s, already starting in the 60s of the 20th century with conceptual art, with political art. That's a big jump now, but anyway, it's good to remember that within the system of the art, the questioning of the hegemonic structures of knowledge for political reasons or for conceptual reasons, the question of the notion of art itself is or can be considered as something that already started or restarted art as research. And so we do have a genealogy in artistic research that kind of leads back to historical aspects, very old ones, but also more recent ones. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I do think that with a different kind of self-understanding within the field of artistic research, with a different kind of legitimizing oneself, not in continuous discussion of epistemological argument. Why is that in this method too relevant for sciences? Why can art be producing knowledge and so forth? But looking on the tradition, the history of art to be considered as research would, in a way, strengthens, I think, the position of artistic research within the contemporary field of the production of knowledge or humanities and sciences. Because, as you all know, the term artistic research, even though it has such a history, it did not exist and it occurred in the context of the Bologna process. Because in this kind of political process, and that's interesting, artistic research came into being because of a political process, the political process of the European Union that wanted to unify or to equalize systems of education. And so art academies became universities or should become universities. And because universities do research or should make research, artistic research came into being, came into existence. And now it appears to be such a young or undeveloped or a field of constant self-legitimation, but in fact, if one looks back, it does has a rich tradition and history. But because that is somehow forgotten, we do find ourselves indeed in this ambivalent or even dialectical situation where on the one hand, we need regulations, we need the institutionalization of artistic research, we need PhD trajectories or rules. And on the other hand, we do stress not only the autonomy or the freedom or of art, but also of research itself. And one could look at, for instance, the order of discourse that Michel Foucault spoke about in the 70s on two different levels. It could be a prescription and a description, or a demand or a problem. So for me, or what I would like to say here is that because we have that ambivalent existing history of artistic research, and not the term as such, but the concept as such, we do struggle in today's positioning of artistic research in the field of sciences and humanities, and do find ourselves constantly confronted with these problematic questions of a demand of impact, a demand of scientification, a demand of disciplination. But on the other hand, we could take it as a kind of turn it around as an empowerment, and to say, yes, artistic research does have an impact, a strong impact on society, a strong impact on sciences. It's changing the entire field of sciences of today. It's working on the pluralization of knowledge. It's diversifying practices, methods. It's generating new terms, new forms of insights. And so the question of artistic research should have an impact. I would always say it has already one, and we should work with it in a very productive, positive, even powerful way. Thank you.